welcome back to the Rangers News YouTube channel. My name is James Black and I'm joined once again by Jordan Carlisle. And this time we're going to have a little special look back at Steven Gerrard's Rangers career so far as the Rangers boss reaches 150 games in the dugout at Ibrox. So the Ross County game at the weekend was Gerrard's 150th game, and the Gerrard boss has been a pretty big success, if I'm being honest, over the time that he's been at the club. I think there's been a lot of improvement from when he took over after Jimmy Nicholl's short time as caretaker, where we've moved on for the Pedro in a bush nonsense in Luxembourg, and it's probably fair to say we're in a much better place overall. So just kind of what's your kind of overall thoughts on Gerrard's time so far, Jordan?
Yeah, it's tough to disagree, isn't it? It's he came in, he was very impressive, wasn't he, when he came in? It was a big statement from Rangers in the first place. I think even though he had no senior management experience, a massive figure in the game, global name. He's always sort of, with the odd blip in terms of sending off some big games, has consistently carried himself really well throughout his playing career and has just done the same at Rangers. I think he's been under a lot of pressure at times, which he knew he was going to get himself in for. I think often they would talk about players coming in and then they'll say, I didn't realise how big a club it was until they play the first game at Ibrox or there's the first reaction to their defeat. But I never really got that impression with Gerrard. I think he knew what it was all about. He'd never, played in Scotland before, but in terms of Liverpool, he had some sort of comparison there into a massive club that's sort of in the fabric of the city and all that. And he was very well aware of that at the start. I think it's kind of weird saying success for a guy who hasn't won any trophies yet. But the position he was in the squad he inherited was just so far behind Celtic. And I think we talked, it was sort of in the balance, wasn't it, before this season? I think it really was in the balance in terms of if it was another poor one in terms of the blip after the winter. I think 3 years in a row, that would have been unacceptable had the thing been tight and if there had been no more trophies. But it's impossible to ignore the fact that the playing staff, the squad is now better. It's a lot more organised. The club as a whole are being more professional in terms of their output. Performances are better, and now results are fantastic. So, it's been some overhaul, and the fact that there's barely any players there that were there when he came in, and the performances are transformed. It sort of went through stages of some sort of progress, some promise, and then same feelings or things at the same time of the year. But now it looks like a Rangers that can play a couple of different ways. There's no major issue if major players are injured because there's people to step in instead and everyone's got a clear idea what they're doing. So in terms of a management job, it's been absolutely brilliant. I think in terms of where it's come from and when they finish off the league this year, he will sort of immortalise himself, won't he, with the club, because it's just unprecedented the spell, given the circumstances, obviously, but the spell without major trophies, and he's going to be the man to end that. And very few people looking in from the outside would be brave enough to take the job on in the first place and then to really own it as he has done, brought in all his own staff and started a whole new culture almost. Sort of come from very little, just having the infrastructure of the club really and the fans, but not much in terms of what he had in the pitch to come from there to where Rangers are now, outperforming Celtic domestically and in Europe as Scotland's premier team now, without a doubt. It's some turnaround.
And just looking at some of his statistics since he took charge here, he's had 98 wins, 32 draws and 20 losses. The scoring, 320 goals scored when the 99 conceded. It's a fantastic record to get. I mean, it's almost just short of 66% win ratio. It's a fantastic positive goal record. Biggest winning 8-0 against Hamilton Accies. And it's a massive, massive turnaround for a few years ago when Rangers were struggling against teams like Hamilton at home, Ross County at home, and just they looked to be in a very bad place and looked to be a long, long way off from where we needed to be. But we're going to look a little bit more in depth at just a few different bits over his time, kind of best players, best signings, my favourite match. So we'll kind of get right into it, and we'll just start off with kind of the best player overall in Gerrard's reign. So that can be anybody that was here before he came. So we can have Morelos, you can have Ryan Jack, or any of the guys he's brought in. I mean, for me, there's a couple of candidates. Scott Arfield, Connor Goldson, and Stephen Davis are all up there. Morelos and Jack kind of round out probably my top five. It's difficult to really separate one from the other. I don't know if you've got anybody that's kind of really stands out for you or not.
I think Tav is my number one. I think in terms of he's obviously got a lot of stick previous to this year. Some of that has been warranted. I only really feel though there was a period last season when he really struggled and there was lapses that led to goals in big games, young boys and stuff in old firms and at Hearts and that sort of stuff, some big moments. But see, other than that, I thought it was unfair. I always thought he was a really good leader on the pitch, the best athlete in the team, unbelievable engine, never injured, just and the contribution and the importance to the style of play, just it's so hard to understate. I think what he's done, and now he's getting the credit for it. He has been also better. He's taken things to another level this year, and you can see that in his numbers. But I just think he's a guy that is he's made mistakes in terms of those program notes, the Hamilton.
I still don't think that's anywhere near as bad as it was made out to be.
Yeah, but I think anything though. The problem is that Rangers, the fan base, do not accept anything that suggests that someone at the club isn't, fully...
Yeah, I get that. For me, I always felt that because particularly of that, I always felt the anger was slightly misplaced because, for me, I would much rather that Tavernier would come out and go, we have been a bit shit, we have struggled, we've not been at our best, then come out and go, what are you talking about, guys? We're brilliant. That's the kind of thing that I've heard from Celtic for years and years and years, that, they can lose 4-0 to Hamilton, but they're still the greatest team in the world for some reason. And for me, I always felt that Tavernier was quite harshly criticised for ultimately being honest, because, I mean, it was as plain as the nose in any of our faces that we weren't in a good place at that time. And you only need to look at the result of that Hamilton game to see that it was completely spot on in his assessment. But
yeah, I also think there that it's partially because of who it was. There's no getting away with the fact that a lot of people were very keen to jump on him and have been for a long time. I also thought it was poor from the club though. There's got to be some sort of acknowledgement of what the club is like, what the fan base expects, and just because he wants to write it, it's sort of an obligation that he has some sort of program note to contribute to that every now and then. There should be better. It should have been better. It shouldn't have went out. It should have been changed at least. So I think that's as much about his job is to play games and be a really good right back and lead the team, not to write the program notes. It's something that comes with it, but it's not what he's paid to do. So I think yes, I agree that it was harshly treated, but it was still a mistake, I think. But yeah, I just think his unbelievable consistency and the fact that he's contributed at both ends of the pitch for so long. The fact that he's one of the very few, is he now the only one really who's there, who regularly plays in the team? We've got Morelos and him. That's it in terms of regular starters. He's lasted the whole time of a total regime change as the captain, and a thing that was pretty much fundamentally broken beforehand. And Gerrard's come in and said, look, Morelos, you're my main striker and you're my captain. And he's just overcome so much. in terms of the criticism from his own fans, from rival fans, being ridiculed at times for his defending, and which, he's still not the perfect defender by any means, but he's done. Rangers' defensive record this season is brilliant. He's as a big part of that, and going forward, he's been an absolute joke this season. So he's my player of the 150.
So, do you think it'd be fair to say he's the most improved player at Rangers in Gerrard's time as well? Because for me, it's probably him or Ryan Jack. I was a massive fan of Jack before he came to Ibrox anyway. But for me, Tav probably just shades it. And I think, I don't want to say that Tavernier necessarily was a poor player in his first couple of years at the club. But I think you've just got a more consistent and a better rounded player than you probably are. I think defensively, he's much better than he's given credit for. I think it's one of the areas where, if you go back and watch, particularly Warburton era, James Tavernier, and that first season back in the Premiership, watch him this season, a different guy.
Yeah.
It's a whole different player. So I think he's defending. I think a lot of people still think defensively he's the same guy that he was 3-4 years ago, but he's night and day now.
I think it was sort of at that time, this was signing from Wigan for 200 grand, and he scored a couple of spectacular goals. Was still good then from free kicks and that sort of thing, but there wasn't stuff that you would point out and say this guy's. There's no way they got this guy for 200 grand. He's brilliant. So I do agree to that extent. He's come on, and I think Jack has as well. He's added a lot more in terms of going forward, and is more consistent. I think the fact that he's missed lots of games with injury hasn't helped his cause if we're looking at things that way around. And I think that just the fact that Tav's been there, injuries, players can't be blamed for the injuries, but Tav just has been there through thick and thin. And yeah, I just think it's just his engine is absolutely remarkable. And I was going to say something else there, but I can't even remember what it was. But I just think it must be so. We talk about this in like the modern game and all that, and Rangers fans have really high standards. That's always been the case. But the fact that you have some players on social media, some players not, but the level of stick that he got for a long period of time, he could have just left. He could have just sacked it in, and he would have left. And a lot of people, even more people, would say, he never really cut it at Rangers, did he? He didn't have enough. But he stuck it out, and that's what I was going to say. I think that I agree that he's better defensively than he was. I still don't think he's perfect. He switches off every now and then. He can take unnecessary risks and stuff in there. But when you look at the Premier League, everyone waxes lyrical about the Premier League. I think there's some seriously dodgy defending in there on a weekly basis. I think he could play for not a top 4 or 5 team. Probably he could play for anyone else in the league and do a really good job. And I'd be very surprised if people don't move from somewhere. The fact that he's nearly 30 might count against him, but I think he's a top player.
Well, moving on from the best player overall during Gerrard's time at Ibrox, we're going to look a little bit more at signings. So it's fair to say there have been a lot of new faces come in over the transfer windows when Gerrard's been here. This month, unsurprisingly, looking like being the quietest of his reign. And it might only be Scott Wright that comes in a pre-contract. There might be a couple more. But, we're not looking at 5, 6, 7 new faces this month. Looking at the guys he's brought in, and just because I've seen there's been a bit of toing and froing on this on Twitter when people have spoke about it before, we're going to count Alan McGregor and Scott Arfield and look at kind of who Gerrard's best signing's been. I'm going to count those two because despite being announced after Gerrard, people are like, but he didn't quite sign them, but he did. He was manager when that happened, so we're counting them. And if you didn't like it, well, tough. But yeah, so best signing in Gerrard's time at Ibrox. And again, that's one where, for me, there's a few candidates. You've got the two I've just mentioned, Arfield and McGregor, who have... Scott, that's actually surprised me quite a bit. And looking at some of the stats before this, just Scott Arfield has made the third highest number of appearances under Gerrard, 126.
Which is impressive for a guy who, at the start of this season, certainly I don't think was in the strongest 11, or people wouldn't see him in the strongest 11.
126 out of 150 games for Arfield. There's a couple of surprises there actually. Alan McGregor and Morelos are separated by one game in the last 3 years, which
Even though Morelos is,
you never have imagined. But looking at some of the guys it has, but I mean, for me, Connor Goldson's just been. He's been imperious this season. He's a foundation on which a lot of our success has been built. I think Alan McGregor gets a lot of credit, but I think when you actually watch games, now McGregor will pull out some fantastic saves, but he might only do it once every 5 games because the guys in front of him do so well to let him sit in his arse and get paper out and just watch the game essentially. So yeah, Goldson's one for me. Arfield and McGregor are both up there. One or two others. I think Kamar Roof's got a very, very good shout going on and shown that it could well be the best signing Gerrard's made. You look at the start he's made since arriving in the summer. The guy's been incredible. But who for you is there any that's Goldson head and shoulders above? Or
yeah, it's Goldson for me. I just, it's stunning. I see it's been very obvious that he's been the main man in terms of playing at the back since he came in. But just the fact that when it actually, you point out the hard numbers, I think it's 142 of 150 games, which is, that's a joke. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous.
Just to make it even more ridiculous, of that 142 appearances, 141 are starts.
It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I think the Scotsman, that piece that we picked up on the other day, that they had claimed it was unreferenced in terms of how many leagues they looked across, and Rangers, it's very, very plausible because the Scottish League started early than a lot of others, saying that he'd played the most minutes of anyone in Europe, in any league in Europe this year, which is a brilliant thing for him personally. The 35 games at that point, and he played the full 90 minutes in all of them. The guy, as Gerrard said, makes it very clear that he doesn't want to come off ever. You could see that at the weekend. I think that's been sort of maybe to the detriment of George Edmondson earlier in the year, but not to the detriment of Rangers in any way, because it's that consistency. I think traditionally you talk about having a consistent back four and how important that has been for teams. You talk about like that great United team and Vidic and Ferdinand in there, and that's the sort of rock of the success. It's just been Goldson. And the thing is that the guy plays the same way, the same level, no matter who he's playing with. So it's like, I think he has improved over his time, to be fair, and there have been mistakes along the way, but you're not going to play 142 games as a centre back and not give the ball away the odd time, especially when you're a bit of a ball player. So he played with Worrell, Edmondson, Hollander, Balogun. Yeah, it's just ridiculous, and it's just completely the same in terms of his approach. Brilliant in the air, good on the deck as well, decent pace. So yeah, I think Gerrard, when he wins the league this year, when he is no longer Rangers manager, will look back and know that guy was there for him the whole time, and has done brilliantly. I think in terms of, you have to mention Kamara as well, because that was also ludicrous in terms of a piece of business. Obviously, they were going to get him for free in the summer anyway, but the 50 grand's well talked about. It's a ridiculous fee to get a player of that quality in, and he's someone who has a massive sell-on value or potential for Rangers to get a big fee. So he's another one. Yeah, Arfield has continued to sort of impress, a guy who's obviously a very established player coming into the team. I think he's found his niche a bit more now, because he was playing in that inside forward role for a while and went through hot and cold patches. He's brilliant in midfield. So yeah, there's a lot of really good signings there, of a mixture of players who had stuff to prove and people who had proven quality. But yeah, Goldson I think is the number one.
So we've done the good, so it's only fair to do the bad. There have been some howlers. I know people will go, oh, but they were Mark Allen signings, which is a bit of a cop out. Gerrard gets the praise when we sign good players, so he gets the flack when we sign shite. And there has been some of that. Eros Grezda is the very obvious one, and they've all half a mind to disqualify him just because he's that obvious. But but there are a couple more. Kyle Lafferty, for me, is a shambolic signing. Like I didn't get it at the time. I don't get it now. And I'll probably not get it the day that I get lowered into the ground or fired out a cannon, whatever one it is that happens at the time. So, bad signings. Andy Firth, one that's up there for me as well. No harm to the guy, but you're not telling me that Andy Firth done anything that Kieran Wright, Robbie McCrory, Aidan McAdams, or any other number of the litany of young talented goalkeepers that Rangers have at the club could do. So over to you, Jordan. Who's any particular howlers that spring to mind?
Yeah, I think all have a Grezda was ludicrous, wasn't it? From the not playing to then going and playing for the B team and spitting on people, and it was just an absolute shambles, the whole thing. Although he did he not contribute quite heavily to that B team getting to that? Was that not the game you're at?
Strolled it, mate. He absolutely strolled it in Solihull. He came and spoke to me and everything. He came across as a genuinely lovely bloke. But
well, Rangers legend after that performance. But I mean, I think Lafferty is one where I don't know. I'm obviously biased as a Northern Ireland fan, and I've seen him do some brilliant things down the years. He's never been a prolific goal scorer.
I have my biases in favour of Kyle Lafferty as well. I have an entire side of my family who support that other mob with the name Lafferty. It has its benefits. So I'm very in his favour as well. But that was one where it just seemed like we need a striker. Who can we get? And somebody just says, Kyle Lafferty's available.
He actually started all right as well. He scored the brace at Motherwell and did a couple other things. But like he said himself that he was disillusioned by the fact that he knew he wasn't going to play or get regular. When he was coming on, he was getting 15 minutes and he didn't show enough. I think ones at the minute, I think it's harsh talking about players that are still there to a certain extent. But Jake Hasty seems a strange one. He had 3 months or something at Motherwell, and I think he scored a few goals, and it was maybe a bit of here's a good young Scottish player, we've got to sign him before someone else does. That's been disastrous. He played the St Joseph's game. I think that might be it. He was hooked at half time or early in the second half. He looked overawed by it, and he did. And see, to be fair, like he was playing on loan in the lower divisions until 4 or 5 months before he was Rangers.
Yeah, he was at Alloa on loan. Returned to Motherwell in the January. I think he played maybe 15 games, and there may be something like 5 goals and 5 assists in there or something along those lines, maybe a little bit more. And we threw a whole load in with him and jumped to sign him, and it was like, this is a kid that was playing for Alloa 6 months ago, and he wasn't setting the world alight at all. It's not as if he was in the Championship. And I mean, you look at the boy Thomas Robert at Airdrie, who's getting rave reviews playing at a lower level. He still wasn't even getting that at Alloa, so the whole thing just seemed weird to me.
Yeah, it was a strange one. I think Barker was a strange one, giving him a 3-year contract. Having been at Hibs before and shown glimpses but not done much. I think the player who maybe be most disappointed by what he's offered is Jones. Again, I haven't seen him with Northern Ireland. He's a player who is capable of really, really good moments. He's electric pace, but it's just done nothing. He scored once, got 2 assists or something. He's been at the club for over a season and a half now. He sort of sabotaged himself with the sending off against Celtic, and then the COVID stuff this year, but he struggled. Yeah, as you say, Andy Foote's an unbelievable one. The guy, as sort of fans have pointed out, he's just literally living the dream. He turns up to training every day. He gets paid for it. He's played 7 minutes or something since he's been at the club. So that is a bizarre one. I think he'll be going in the summer because Rangers have been handing out new contracts to goalkeepers left, right, and centre. So to the academy keepers, that is. So there's no way he's staying beyond this season. But yeah, there's been a few ones in there, haven't there? But was it not Fergie said it's 50% transfers? So I think he's probably done more than that. So yeah, no, I think that's there have been a few hurdles, but plenty of positives as well. I think the main thing is they haven't cost too much.
So just kind of overall in Gerrard's transfer, do you think that he's got more right and he's in a position where you're like, well, you give him the benefit of the doubt, the good ones have worked out better than the bad ones have sucked, really?
Yeah, I think absolutely, because you can point to I think in terms of money spent, a lot of it has been good, and in terms of there haven't been any outrageous ones. The 7 million for Kent, based on the evidence, was high in comparison to other signings that Rangers made in the past. But getting Goldson for whatever it was, 2.5, 3 million. Helander hasn't played that much, but 4 million for him, a really experienced guy who's done well. The Joe Aribo one, 300 grand. Kamara, 50 grand. Itten for 2.5 million. Roof for 3.5, whatever it is. Like those are they haven't spent. The players didn't cost the earth, and the team is unbelievably stronger. I think the thing is the Rangers have struggled to get transfer fees in the last few years. That might change in the summer. I think the club are hoping that it changes in the summer. But Grezda cost 2 million, I think. But other than that, there haven't been big. Like Barker was free, Firth was free, whatever it was. Barrow, I think they're still shocked probably that they came in and got him. Lafferty, what was that, 500 grand or something like that? So they haven't broke the bank for any of the flops, and yeah, very positive, I think.
So just moving on, I think this is going to be one that'll be a very quick one. Favourite game? I think I know we were both going with that.
Yeah, I think it's the first Old Firm win, the Jack goal. I think it ended up not meaning a great deal. Obviously, that it wasn't the race for the league wasn't tight. It was sort of non-existent, but it was unbelievable atmosphere and the sort of sense that Rangers were now capable of actually playing against Celtic. And not there was so many times when playing at Ibrox, you see Cal McGregor, Tom Rogic, Edward going through on goal, it being an absolute stroll for them. And I think that was a sign that things were changing. It wasn't as quickly as some people thought maybe after that. But yeah, that just the noise and the noise when that went in, like in terms of, I'm sure it's been so well viewed on YouTube, but Kent going dancing down the left, cutting back in, sending Lustig, basically off the playing surface with the wee dummy, and then laying it back through Brown's legs. Was a nice touch, and yeah, just a massive game in terms of Gerrard, and obviously he was pumped as well. So I've got that. I think as well in terms of European games, the Braga one was unbelievable, and Rangers were
Morelos' goal against Poznan.
Pardon?
Morelos' goal against Poznan, the noise after that one as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The in the qualifiers, yeah. I think the Braga one was just that was a quality. They had serious quality in their team in terms of footballers. The 2 goals that they scored were top notch, and I remember I was just like, this is a step too far. They're too good. In the first leg, looked like Rangers were out of it after an hour, but that was an unbelievable comeback. So I think that sort of epitomised how Rangers have overachieved, maybe, and I think it was overachieving, and now it's just not. It's not expected, and it should be the Champions League next year, and whatever can come from that comes from that. But I think that's the European performance and the domestic one for me.
So 150 games gone. I think roughly by the time we get to the next 150, we'll be kind of nearing the end of Gerrard's current contract, which runs till 2024. Do you think we get to 300? And where do you think Rangers are 150 games from now?
I think it depends on him. It's not going to depend on the club. But I can't imagine in terms of, obviously we're all sort of assuming that the league is won this year. It would take something absolutely dramatic for it not to happen. If he's the guy that stops the rot in terms of the league and wins the 55th title and that sort of stuff, he's seriously secure there. And it's just so clear now that he has a clear idea. Everyone's bought into it. So as long as he wants to stay there, I think he will be there as long as things keep going in that sort of direction. I think a lot of people have pointed out to the fact that he will be at Liverpool, he will go, and he'll want to go to England and he'll want to do Newcastle and all this sorts of thing. I think that's. I don't think he would view a Newcastle or anything like that as bigger than what he's doing now. And I just think the way he talks, there's no guarantees. He's contract until 2024. But the way he talks is always looking forward and how he's going to develop Hadji and how he's going to develop, they're bringing in players of a good age and all this, and how he's talking about the youth system and a plan for Patterson. It doesn't sound like he's developing these players for someone else to coach them and for someone else to get the success from him. I think he's happy where he is. The only thing is obviously the living situation and he's not at home and all that, and how long he wants to do that in terms of he's married with kids and all that. But I think he said before that his wife would love him to give the whole thing up in general, which is always going to be the case to an extent, isn't it? If you're living away from home, but he's an ambitious guy, isn't he? And he'll
that journey's not the worst in the world. I think it's maybe about 3 hours or so, so it's not terrible. I remember when Davy Weir was here, his family was still, they were still on the south coast, London, Brighton type area. So he was kind of an even bigger commute. But in terms of I don't think I think it'd been a bit further south, maybe a wee bit different. But with it being something where he can finish training, he can drive home, and he's in the house for a reasonable time of a night. If he goes home for a couple of nights, then he can wrap training one day and then be home for dinner time. So it's not too bad that way. But for me, I don't see him going anywhere anytime soon unless Liverpool come for him or England come for him. And I don't see England going for him anytime soon. Southgate seems there for the long haul, and as much as Klopp's kind of having a bit of a wobble just now, if they were to pull the trigger now and bin Klopp, they wouldn't move for Gerrard tomorrow. He's not done enough at Rangers for me that they would take that gamble. I think when you see the whole Frank Lampard thing go up in flames as it has this week, you're kind of a bit more apprehensive. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's doing okay at United, but it's not like Liverpool's going to be looking at Old Trafford for hints on how to do things right. So, I wouldn't see him going to Liverpool anytime soon. But a year or two from now, I don't know. And in the Champions League, Rangers do well in the Champions League next season. All bets are off for me. He could very well end up at Liverpool shortly afterwards.
Yeah, I think the mission isn't just to win the league, though, isn't it? I think that's very clear that this isn't the end goal. It's the start of wanting to win stuff. So, I'd agree on that.
Magic. Well, that's all we've got time for this look back at Gerrard's first 150 games as Rangers manager. Hope you've enjoyed this. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and remember to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.